Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Health Edition, and we are introducing a new book that we are going to read in starting in January. Now, this book is called Vibrational Medicine, and this is by Richard Gerber, MD, and this is the third edition. Okay, there you go. So this book is about subtle energy therapies, as you can see here in the subtitle. And this book was inspired by a quote by Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla was I guess, 20th century, maybe 21st, I don't remember, century scientist, excuse me, who was a genius. Um, if you have a chance, just Google on YouTube or search on YouTube Nikola Tesla, and you can find a lot of starting to find a lot of information about him. But anyways, he had a quote, a famous quote that he said, if you want to understand how the universe works or the secrets of the universe, I'm paraphrasing, of course. He says you have to understand energy, vibration, and frequency. Now, this is probably uncharted territory for a lot of scientists out there and mainstream medicine. So I thought this would be a good time to learn about it because I am big on reading. I'm big on knowledge. I'm big on fundamentals. And I'm big on, there was something else I'm big on, education, self empowerment. That's what I meant to say. So this is part two. We did a part one introduction, and this part two will be the preface to this particular book, which is the third edition. Now, this book is huge. It's about over 500 pages. So it's sort of like a textbook. I think this is a good textbook to read, actually, probably to dive in and analyze, maybe, right? Um, So, before we begin, I just want to say real quick, if you enjoy what we're doing and you like what we do, please consider joining our other book clubs. On Mondays, we have our spiritual book clubs where we read spiritual books. This particular book, Vibrational Medicine, is considered health edition in our book club, so it would be under on Wednesdays under health. And then Thursdays, we have our financial book clubs where we read finances, books about finances, about money, where money came from, history of money and things like that. So, and we put all the books that we have read, past books and present books as well on YouTube. So please check out our YouTube channel. We on our YouTube channel we also have podcasts as well. I interview interesting people once in a while, and I'll put it up on there. So please check us out there. And we're also working on some new stuff coming out next year. So come back often, subscribe and like and all that good stuff for the YouTube algorithm. And comment, please comment. I understand I understand that commenting helps with the algorithm. I don't know how that works, but anyways, you guys know what to do. If you have a book that you would like us to read, if you want to recommend a book to read, whether it's a spiritual book, a health book, or a financial book, I will leave a link in the description box below and you can recommend it. We will love to consider it at our discretion if it meets our criteria. And then if you can um, sign up for our newsletter. We have support us by signing up for our newsletter. We have a monthly newsletter that we put out, all things happening in the world of the Bodega Cat. And so join us and follow us, and Yeah, this is a community that we want to build together, and community is very important, whatever community that you're with. And if you want to support us further, you can consider buying me a coffee, leaving a donation, or checking out our merch. We have new designs coming out every month for your fur babies, for your cats and dogs, as well as for humans. So please check us out. We're coming out with new designs and then updating old designs. So please check us out there. It's on our website under shop. And then lastly, if you are local in the Los Angeles area or if you're visiting Los Angeles, come join us in our healing center. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's, the scientist I mentioned earlier in the video, um, using his research. The technology is based on his research on scalar wave energies. Hmm. So you can read about that on our website and come join us. We would love to have you here and meet you in person and get to know you. And yeah, so check out our website and other services that we provide on there as well. Okay, let's get started. So this book is Vibrational Medicine. And this episode will be the preface to the third edition. Now, if you have a book, I will leave a link in the description box below if you wish to purchase the book. If not, you could follow with us here on camera. And let me see if I need to move the camera in a little bit here. Yeah, okay, that's good enough. This is for those of you who have poor eyesight like me. My eyesight isn't like what it used to be. Oh, okay. All right. So this is preface to the third edition. Here we go. Let's do it. It has been more than 12 years since the first edition of Vibrational Medicine, New Choices for Healing Ourselves, was released. Since then, many of the ideas introduced in the original edition have begun to work their way into mainstream medical thinking. It was with this more mainstream audience in mind that I published a second book entitled Vibrational Medicine for the 21st Century, or A Practical Guide to Vibrational Medicine in its paperback edition, with which addresses some but not all of the topics covered in my first book. The volume you hold in your hands, however, Vibrational Medicine, the #1 handbook of subtle energy therapy, is an updated third edition of the original Vibrational Medicine. This updated version of my original book will allow you to explore the true esoteric science behind etheric energies. In other words, the Tiller-Einstein model of positive-negative space-time energies. Such a model looks at life force energy as belonging to a category of, quote, faster than light energy, which may very likely be the underlying mechanism behind many vibrational healing modalities, including homeopathy, therapeutic touch, crystal healing, and even acupuncture-related therapies. Some may have difficulty with the faster than light energy model. I believe that a discussion of magneto-electrical energy is critical to a true understanding of the nature of the multidimensional universe, the healing potential of human beings, and vibrational medicine in general. Unlike my more mainstream book, this volume includes a complete exploration of the esoteric history of creation. I should point out, however, that the healing model I present here is not, quote, fixed in stone, but is actually evolving. As further experimentation generates new data, we will need to fine-tune any existing model of energy medicine. My position continues to be one that supports further research into energy medicine, not only to validate individual healing modalities with regard to their effectiveness, but also to explore the synergistic qualities of conventional and alternative medicine as they blend together in the 21st century. This book is organized somewhat like a textbook, complete with key points to remember at the end of each chapter. I must thank Dr. Dolores Krieger. I think I said that right. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, Dr. Krieger or Krieger, for the added key points sections, which I often refer to as the cliff notes for the text. Sorry. I added these summary sections to make sure other readers would be able to follow each concept and come away with the necessary building blocks to understand subsequent chapters. I believe that this feature has helped to make vibrational medicine widely accepted as an introductory textbook to the fascinating, but sometimes bewildering, field of energetic healing. It is best to read the chapters in sequence in order to get the most out of the material. Exactly how I came to write my original book is a fascinating story. I had been exploring the different aspects of alternative and energetic healing approaches since I was a medical student in the mid 70s. While I had always been fascinated by acupuncture, herbal medicine, and laying on of hands healing, which was then called quote paranormal healing, my interest really peaked when I entered Wayne State School of Medicine in 1976. At that time, I heard about a manuscript called A Course in Miracles that was quietly circulating in Xerox form throughout the United States. As an aside, it should be noted that A Course in Miracles was eventually published in book form on Valentine's Day, February 14th. In retrospect, the symbolic meaning of the course being published on Valentine's Day seems to be that it was, metaphorically speaking, a quote, gift from the heart to thousands of seekers of spiritual enlightenment and love. As you will see, the significance of Valentine's Day would prove to have a reoccurring and even deeper personal meaning for me as well. Regarding its content, the Course in Miracles consisted of a textbook, a workbook of daily exercises, and a manual for teachers. The course presented a new way of looking at spirituality embedded in two basic premises. The first premise is that miracles are natural, and when they do not occur, something has gone, quote, wrong. The second premise relates to the concept of fear and the fact that love involves letting go of fear. The accompanying series of experiential exercises presented in the workbook help to retain a person's consciousness to actually see the world differently. I immersed myself in the course along with my medical school studies and eventually began to meet with a study group of professionals in the Detroit area who shared a similar interest in the course. This diverse collection of individuals included lawyers, nurses, physicians, and business people from a variety of religious and spiritual backgrounds. Our Course in Miracles study group met one night a week for many months. During meetings, we would share our personal experiences with the Course and discuss how it had begun to affect our lives. The Course was a major re-education in spirituality for me and taught me to see the world in an entirely different light. In addition, I found that certain psychic abilities began to awaken in me the further into the course I went. Let me say that A Course in Miracles was said to have been dictated, quote, dictated via psychic or telepathic means to a professional psychologist from what was said to have been a very, quote, high spiritual source. Excuse me. Air is very dry. Sorry about that. It should also be said that the material contained in the course approached spirituality from a very different viewpoint than the one the quote author had grown up with. Nonetheless, the information within this quote channeled text was so fascinating and felt so intuitively correct to me that the quote source of the wisdom became less of an issue than the value and insights of the material contained in the text itself. I now believe that the changes in my consciousness that came about as a result of working with the course eventually set the stage for my writing the original Vibrational Medicine. And as a side note, anyone that you listen to listen to the message, not, or focus on the message, not the messenger. So, um, okay, continue. Which is why sometimes another side note, sometimes I would listen to someone, I would close my eyes and deliberately not look at that person, and just listen to the vibration, to the voice, to the tone, to the message. So try that sometime. That's very interesting. Interesting exercise. Because looks can be deceiving, as they say. Okay. Over the next 7 years, first as a medical student, then as an internal medicine resident, I continued to work with the course while I supplemented my formal medical education with my own, quote, alternative medicine education program, end quote. In my initial search for information about A Course in Miracles, I learned that Judith Skutch, oh, sorry, butchered that name, Scutch Whitson, I guess. I guess that's how you say it. Publisher of the course and head of the Foundation for Inner Peace, had lectured in the Detroit, had lectured in the Detroit area at the PSI Society, short for Parapsychology Society International. I eventually caught up with this little-known group and shortly thereafter was asked by the president of PSI to join their board of directors. A central aim of the PSI Society was to have monthly meetings featuring speakers who had expertise in the areas of ESP, telepathy, psychokinesis, parapsychology, and healing. And as a side note, these are all natural and intuitive to us as human beings. We have just forgotten about it or suppressed it or both. Just a side note there. And that's my opinion. Because of my position, continue. Because of my position on the PSI board of directors, I was able to invite a number of prominent researchers and healers to speak at many of the monthly PSI Society meetings. Guests include the famous healers Olga Worrell and Matthew Manning, as well as parapsychology researchers such as Stanley Krippner, Charles Tart, Douglas Dean, and Lawrence LaShawn. Prior to each meeting, the board enjoyed a private dinner with the featured guest lecturer. In talking with many of the prominent healers, I became convinced that although their healing abilities were well documented through various scientific studies, few of the healers understood how the healing process really worked. Most considered themselves to be channels for a higher power and were just happy that the work was able to benefit individuals who were struggling with pain and suffering. Some healing researchers, such as Dr. Robert Becker, had put forth theories that attempted to explain certain aspects of healing, but to my way of thinking, none of the theories went quite far enough to account for all of the healing phenomena I had experienced or read about. My desire is more fully understand My desire to more fully understand the process of healing led me to search for a scientific model that would both allow for the existence of such phenomena and provide further explanation of how healing really worked. I should mention that before my interest in things vibrational and paranormal developed, I was very much a, quote, left brain analytical thinker, rejecting most things that did not fit into the model of mainstream science. However, after finding out that incredible scientific researchers were valiantly struggling to explain the existence of, quote, anomalous healing events, I began to adopt a more open attitude. At the same time, I realized that if any change was to come about in the sciences and the healing profession, some type of transitional scientific model was needed to bridge the gap between physics and the metaphysical. And just a side note, my teacher said healing needs to come from the right brain. Right brain is for healing, for problem solving. You cannot solve a problem with the left brain, with data and analysis and facts and figures. It has to come from the left brain. And that is where God is. That's the right brain. God is where the right brain is. That's the that's where the imagination is. That's where the problem solving is. That's where healing is. That's where all the what else was I going to say? Um, there was something else I was going to say. I don't remember now. But anyways, that's where the right brain is. Uh, yeah, that's where pictures, dreams, images. That's what I was going to say. That's where the right brain. That's where it resides, on the right brain. So if you want to get anywhere in life, you got to live in the right brain. Well, actually, you got to do both, left and right. Uh-oh, I gotta hold on a second. That was an emergency alert for extreme weather. We're expecting a lot of rain in Los Angeles for the next week. So I think that was what it was about. Okay, people, sorry about that. All right, let us continue. I think I've kind of rambled on long enough. Um, where was I now? One of the early events that helped to open my thinking was a fascinating conference I attended in 1977 at the University of Toronto entitled, quote, Parapsychology and Paranormal Medicine. It featured scientists who were studying what was then considered fringe science. After the many lecturers who spoke at this meeting was a physician by the name of Dr. Robert Leichman. Leichman, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry, doctor, I butchered your name. Anyways, he's a medical doctor, MD. Dr. Leichman's talk included a fascinating discussion of a phenomenon he simply referred to as, quote, night school. It was Dr. Leichman's claim that unlike conventional night school classes, the night school classes he referred to were attended by individuals on the astral plane during the time their conscious minds and physical bodies were deeply asleep. Leichman spoke about being given medical training in these astral classes that extended his conventional education, helping him to become an excellent, quote, intuitive diagnostician. Leichman found he was making accurate intuitive diagnosis on patients with complex medical problems often before he had taken an extensive medical history or even examined the patient. In support of his night school claims, Leichman referred to a book by a neuropsychiatrist, Dr. Shafika Karagula, MD, which also discussed classes taught on the astral plane. Karagula had been inspired by reading Gina Surminara's book, Many Mansions, which told the story of the famous psychic Edgar Cayce, sometimes known as, quote, the sleeping prophet. Intrigued, Dr. Karagula began researching psychic abilities in the general population and the business community and discovered through many private discussions that many successful business people also possess strong psychic and precognitive abilities. And just a side note, in the business world, it is called gut feeling. So a lot of people would ask, what's your gut tell you? Your gut is your second brain, your intuition. Uh, okay. Where am I? I think I'm kind of lost here. Um, okay, continue. Quite a few of these individuals, including CEOs of major corporations, also had memories of attending, quote, night school classes similar to those described by Dr. Leichman. In fact, in one case, an individual uh, got distracted there for a minute. In fact, in one case, an individual recalling a recent quote, night school class reported seeing a friend there. Upon calling the friend for verification, the friend replied that he too had experienced a similar dream of being in a class on the night in question. During Dr. Karagula's research, she met a mathematics professor, Dr. Viola Petit Neal, who had total recall of her quote night school classes. Neal was able to describe complex thought form teaching aids used by the astral lecturers, as well as detailed information on the subject matter of the astral classes. Karagula's second book, Through the Curtain, contains actual lecture notes taken from a number of the astral classes attended by Petit Neal concerning developments in science, higher psychic perception, healing, and the nature of etheric energies. A rather large excerpt from Through the Curtain can be found in this book in my chapter on crystals. From my experiences with A Course in Miracles and books like Through the Curtain, I became increasingly aware of two important concepts. First, that humans are more than just physical bodies. We are multidimensional spiritual beings whose consciousness continues on the higher planes even after the death of the physical body. Secondly, there are those in spirit who seek to communicate with individuals still in physical incarnation. The nature of the communication is twofold. Those in spirit seek to let us know of the continuation of consciousness beyond the death of the physical form. And perhaps more importantly, they want to give information to us that will help us in our understanding of the multidimensional universe, especially as it pertains to healing, soul growth, and personal spiritual evolution. Intrigued by what I had already learned, I became increasingly interested in, quote, technical channeled information, multidimensional viewpoints of illness, and healing that purportedly came, quote, from spirit. Of special interest to me was scientific information from, quote, channeled sources that could also be empirically tested. It may surprise many people to learn that the use of channeled scientific and technical information as a research tool is more widespread than previously thought. For instance, major businesses, health researchers, and world governments have used channeled readings to obtain information about future economic trends, mechanisms of earthquake causation and detection, and even the pathogenesis of certain poorly understood human illnesses. The Center for Applied Intuition in San Francisco, California, run by Dr. William Kotz, sorry, butchered that name, formerly of Stanford Research Institute, has done consulting work for many businesses and private individuals using, quote, expert intuitives to glean channeled information about various subjects. With regard to healing research via channeling, one of the greatest technical psychic channels of all time, Edgar Cayce, was well known for his ability to channel accurate health information about thousands of individuals that he never met physically. The ARE, or Association for Research and Enlightenment, in Virginia Beach, Virginia, is studying the vast legacy of records from Cayce's channeled readings. The ARE Clinic in Phoenix, Arizona, has been studying and applying the healing wisdom gleaned from Cayce's channeled readings for the last several decades. I studied Cayce's material with great interest. I was fascinated to discover that Cayce made many references to energy medicine healing modalities and even referred to the Kundalini phenomenon and the chakra system of the body. At the same time I was reviewing the Cayce material, I was finishing my third year of medical school and had begun to think about ways to incorporate what I was learning into actual medical practice. Therefore, it was with great interest that I read a letter sent to me in 1978 describing a medical student preceptorship program in, quote, holistic medicine at the ARE Medical Clinic in Arizona. Like so many other fateful events in my life, there was a bit of synchronicity associated with the arrival of this letter. While the letter from the ARE clinic arrived in my mailbox, I had been discussing the subject of, quote, away electives during fourth year medical school with fellow students. I was unfamiliar with this offered elective class, which involved fourth year medical students traveling to distant geographical locations in order to do a rotation in radiology, surgery, orthopedics, or some other medical specialty. My classmates informed me that there was a large loose leaf binder at the medical school containing evaluations of away electives submitted by previous participants. That afternoon, I went over to the medical school and began to study the collection of evaluations from past fourth year med students. I was overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices, none of which really seemed to, quote, resonate with me. I returned home, pondering the various electives I had read about. When I arrived at my apartment and opened my mailbox, there was a letter from the ARE clinic offering what seemed to be a perfect fourth year away elective to be spent studying and incorporating alternative medicine into everyday medical practice. I was intrigued by the timelessness of the letter and couldn't figure out how the ARE had gotten my name and address. I had never been on any of the ARE mailing lists, nor had I ever requested information about such an elective. During my fourth year of medical school, I was able to work at the ARE clinic, as well as spend a month working with Dr. Norman Shealy, then first president of the American Holistic Medical Association, during an away elective entitled, quote, Comparisons in Primary Healthcare. As a requirement for the elective, I would write a paper contrasting the holistic approach to medicine practiced by the ARE clinic and Dr. Shealy's clinic with the approach of a conventional internist's office. A most unique feature of the ARE clinic was that it offered, quote, psychic readings from a trained psychic and channel as part of a research program. With great interest, I scheduled time with the resident psychic and per year. As it turned out, much of the information I received during that psychic reading was quite accurate, although the validity of the information only became apparent after a number of years had passed. While I tried to remain open to the psychic data, at the time of my first reading, I was still skeptical. I was still the skeptical scientist, seeking to find some form of scientific validation for the information Anne presented to me. Because Anne was so clairvoyant and quite adept at seeing not only auras, but also pictures and symbols, thought forms, in the auric field, he began with an aura reading. Excuse me. As a partial validation of Anne's psychic perception, my wife, who is also clairvoyant, sat in on another aura reading with Anne some years later. My wife discovered that she could see the same colors and pictures in my auric field as Anne was describing. During my initial aura reading, Anne told me that she saw a great deal of color gold throughout my auric field. According to Per Year, the color gold is esoterically considered to be the color of grace. To her, the preponderance of gold implied that through my work in previous lifetimes, presumably earning karmic brownie points for my good deeds, things would be somewhat easier for me in this lifetime. The words she used were that I was, quote, born under grace and surrounded by gold. An interesting synchronicity, which only became apparent years later in listening to the tape recording of Anne's reading. Many offer another partial, perhaps symbolic, sorry, okay, let me try that again. An interesting synchronicity, which only became apparent years later in listening to the tape recording of Anne's reading, may offer another partial, perhaps symbolic validation of her auric field interpretation. As I listened to the tape, I suddenly remembered that I had been born at Grace Hospital in Detroit. It also occurred to me that the house I grew up in was flanked by the Goldstein's house on the left and by the Goldberg's house on the right. I was literally born under the roof of Grace Hospital and surrounded by gold, Goldstein and Goldberg. Among other notable things that came out in my psychic reading with Anne Puryear was her statement that my auric field was that was her statement that in my auric field there was, quote, a book of bright gold. Anne said that rather than seeing this book as my destiny, I should view it as a great potential that I could fulfill in this lifetime if I followed my inner guidance. Now, this being 1979, and my main concern being finishing medical school and gaining acceptance into internal medicine residency program, writing a book was literally the furthest thing from my mind. So I filed away this bit of psychic data from Anne's reading as interesting, but as yet of little personal meaning. Several years went by, and I was approaching the end of the third year of medical residency in internal medicine at Wayne State in Detroit. In my spare time, I had been doing some investigational work in Kirlian photographic detection of cancer using electrographic fingerprinting. One night, as I was pondering all that I had learned over the previous 6 to 7 years in my private alternative medicine education program, I had a kind of aha experience. Suddenly, everything made sense to me. I saw in a single gestalt an outline for a book that would put together in a grand overview all the different aspects of energetic healing that I had been studying, researching for something to write on, lest the one line slip away. Reaching for something to write on, lest the outline slip away from my consciousness. And I grabbed some blank pages of hospital letterhead for my current rotation. That outline lay on my desk for a year before I actually started to write the first chapter. The year was 1984, and the first Apple Macintosh had just been released, so I went out and bought one. Writing and making corrections on a word processor made all the difference in the world. As I began to correct the first chapter, the second chapter started to develop itself almost effortlessly in my mind, following the same outline quite closely. Although it seemed a little silly at first, I had a strong intuitive impression that I should tape a quartz crystal over the third eye region of my forehead with a band-aid while I was writing. Interesting. Surprisingly, this procedure seemed to accelerate the writing process. Every night, I would come home from work and write for an hour or two on my Mac. Within 9 months, I had written 9 chapters of the book. At that point, I reached an impasse and was unable to do any further work on the manuscript for nearly a year. An inner voice told me that I needed to go to Egypt to complete the book. At the time, this advice made very little sense to me. However, as it turned out, my friend and psychic channel, Anne Puryear, and her husband, Herb, were organizing a, quote, spiritual quest tour to Egypt in 6 months and offered me a half-price trip fee if I would consent to be their trip physician. I readily signed up for the Egyptian tour, which proved to be fascinating. Among the many strange and unusual events that occurred on the trip were the laying on of hands, healings I used with fellow trip members when minor health problems arose after our supply of Lomotil, antibiotics, and the like were exhausted. When I returned from Egypt, I was able to finish the book. Eventually, it occurred to me that I had never considered what I would do about publishing a finished manuscript. By chance, I happened upon a copy of Barbara Hand Close's book entitled Eye of the Centaur, which is based upon Close's doctoral thesis work, sorry, butchered that name, conducted under the guidance of Gregory Paxson in exploring past lives through hypnotic regression. When I picked up the Eye of the Centaur, I opened to a portion that described a past life in Egypt, in which Close's soul had resided in the body of a healer priest. As I began to read the passage, I immediately went into an altered state of consciousness. I had an overwhelming sense that I had carried out actions similar to what Chloe had described in her memories of the Egyptian priest. I also experienced a strong intuitive feeling that I needed to contact Barbara Clow, sorry, butchered that name, personally as soon as possible. I eventually tracked down a phone number for the author at her residence in Santa Fe, Mexico. Several days later, Barbara and I had an extensive phone conversation in which I learned that she also did part-time work as a professional astrologer. I asked her if she would do an astrology reading for me, to which she readily consented. During the course of the astrology reading on a few weeks later, Barbara said, "You know, you could really write a book on alternative healing based on what I see in your chart." At that point, I told Barbara I had recently finished a manuscript on such a topic. I was further amazed to hear that Chloe was also acquisitions editor for a small publishing firm in New Mexico called Bear and Company. Within the week, she had decided to publish my book. Up until that time, I had been pretty uneasy about publishing vibrational medicine under my own name because I did not know what kind of response I would receive from the conventional medical community. I suggested that I use a pseudonym, but Barbara convinced me to publish the book using my own name because they felt an MD background would help to provide further validation for the material. About 8 months after vibrational medicine first appeared in print, I was throwing out some older, unrevised chapters of the manuscript, which came upon my original outline for the book. As I studied the original outline, I noticed two interesting synchronicities. First of all, the outline had been written on Grace Hospital stationery, the same hospital where I was born. So here again was a reference to Anne Puryear's intuitive reading about my life being filled with grace. Secondly, I noted that the date scribbled at the top of the outline was February 14th, 1983, Valentine's Day. As you have already read, February 14 holds great symbolic meaning for this author as the date that A Course in Miracles went into print. My spiritual journey seemed to be coming full circle. Yep, there will be another circle yet to come. Okay, that's my little editorial there. And shortly thereafter, I discovered yet another synchronicity concerning February 14. I discovered that Barbara Clowe's birthday was also Valentine's Day. One final coincidence was even more fascinating. My wife sat with me in the bedroom. As my wife sat with me in the bedroom, she asked where the manuscript for my book was. I asked her why she wanted to know, and she told me that there was a bright gold light coming from the side of the bed and also from the area of the wastebasket. I looked and saw that the finished manuscript for vibrational medicine was lying on the floor at the side of the bed, and that the wastebasket was filled with pages from earlier, uncorrected versions of the book. It was then that I remembered once again my first psychic reading from Anne Puryear that described, quote, a book of bright gold in my auric field. The rest, of course, is history. Since its first printing, vibrational medicine has been translated into Portuguese, Dutch, Russian, Italian, Korean, Japanese, Czech, and Spanish. Oh, interesting. No Chinese. It's very interesting. I have been pleased to find that the book has sold well over 110,000 copies in just the English language alone. It seems that vibrational medicine has been used as a textbook for many courses on healing, bodywork, alternative medicine, and even past life hypnotic regression training. In addition, I have been greatly moved by those who have contacted me with testimonials as to how the book has influenced their health and their lives. Perhaps most amazing to me are those individuals who have told me that reading vibrational medicine led them to explore a new career in healing arts. If I can influence just one person to become a healer or health professional, then and that person goes on to have a positive impact on the lives of others, then all my efforts will have been rewarded. I would like to point out to the readers of Vibrational Medicine that I believe this book is the result of a cooperation between healers and researchers on the physical plane and beings who exist on the higher spiritual planes. This cooperation has made possible the transmission of a wealth of information that is much needed on the planet at this time. Many of the sections of this book are actually, quote, messages from spirit that I have accumulated over the years, channeled through various sources. These nuggets were bits of technical channeled information that, quote, called out to me on an intuitive level. Excuse me, but which needed other pieces of supporting scientific information, both to provide a context for understanding them, as well as to provide greater validity to the material itself. We are truly entering the new millennium. Now that Time magazines has recognized Albert Einstein with its, quote, Person of the Century award, it really makes sense that this next millennium will be the era of what I refer to as Einsteinian medicine. Now that's very interesting because if you take it one step further, you can go to Tesla medicine, which is the truly non-physical, this scalar aspect. I don't know, very interesting. We'll see what this book says. Uh, and again, this book, and I'm kind of rambling on about my opinion here, my train of thought. Um, this book is like a bridge, I think, to the next level of healing, which would be Tesla, I think. That's my opinion, anyways. So, okay, continue. Um, It took nearly 100 years for physicists to catch on to Einstein's profound revelations about the relationship between matter and energy. Perhaps these next 100 years will find the biologists finally catching up, integrating these same Einsteinian insights into the, quote, future medicine that we all hope will come about. Good luck along your personal journey of discovery and spiritual exploration. I hope the sharing of my own story will help others to begin to pay more attention to their inner development and the hidden synchronicities behind their own healing and spiritual unfolding. Richard Gerber, MD, August 29, 2000. Wow, that's an interesting, very interesting story. I think we need a lot of bridges, right, between science and religion, science and spirituality, and many other bridges. I think this year is going to be, or this millennia, this century really would be a century of bridges. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. We will start our reading next year. So sign up for our newsletters, and we will be sending out email notifications of when we're going to be starting. And again, if you don't catch us on YouTube, if you don't catch us live, you could always catch us up on YouTube. And on YouTube, we have the books in a playlist, so you could download it, listen to it when you're jogging, when you're doing, housework, when you're in traffic, when you're, whatever. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great day, and we will see you guys soon. And for those of you in Los Angeles, stay dry and stay warm. Okay, bye-bye now.